right, welcome back everyone to the WebWell Podcast. I'm adding a little intro text here, Ben. This will be new to you, Kent, new to you. This is where we dive into digital depths, bringing the insights from leaders in the world of web development, web design, and marketing. I'm your host, Simon Hart, joined here with Ben McKinley, and today our special guest, Kent Lewis. Welcome.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, so Kent and I think, were introduced formally back in maybe 2009, and more actively connected during the pandemic. Actually, I was invited into a group of agency owners, graciously before I was an EO member, to help navigate some of the weirdness there, and then over the years have continued to bump into each other and find more opportunities to connect. So I'm really excited to share with the audience Kent's insights and perspective on life. And we'll jump right in. Kent, thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to have me. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Well, to kick things off, why don't we start way back and just share a bit about your journey into the world of opening a digital marketing agency in Portland, Oregon. So talk to us maybe about where you grew up and
Sure.
Start there.
So I grew up in Seattle, Washington. I went to an inner city high school, Garfield High School, where I was a minority. It was a really important part of my growth as a person. It was very racially diverse, and it was during the mid '80s. It was definitely, there was the Black Power movement and this and that, and it was eye-opening. We were surrounded by, in that neighborhood at that time, it's all gentrified now, but it was crack houses and gangsters and amazing chicken at Giselle's. But I was young and had no fear of mortality. So, I was on the tennis team. I played horribly, but I did see a shooting one day and it didn't even faze me. I was the only one that didn't hit the ground in our tennis team. I just looked at the guy. I was like, I'm not a rival gang member, so we should be fine here. So, but that school prepped me for college. I went to school up in Western Washington University, Bellingham, Washington, mainly because it was 20 minutes from the Canadian border. And at that time, that was a 19-year-old drinking age. So I thoroughly academically decided to go to Western because of the drinking age nearby. Great school, business degree, marketing concentration. Ironically, unlike a philosophy degree, I'm actually using it. Having run an agency for 22 years that is in marketing, I actually maybe learned a few things that I was able to apply. But I moved to Portland in '95, didn't know anybody, started my career in public relations, and that, basically in March of '95. And by June of '96, I switched gears and moved downstairs to a sister agency and started optimizing websites for 14 different search engines at that time, none of which were Google, because it was back when the internet was in black and white. And it was OG times for me. And after that, long story short, I had 10 jobs in the first 10 years of my career, including Anvil, my 22-year agency. But the reason I became an entrepreneur is I kept getting fired, mostly by incompetent management that didn't understand what I was doing or the value I was bringing. So thankfully, they pushed me out and I did it myself. And it was a fruitful career.
Excellent. So you share that sentiment of feeling like you're pretty unavailable for employee status, huh?
I just prove after 22 years, in March of 22, I sold my agency to another Midwest-based agency. I lasted 14 months as an employee, and further confirmed, no matter how much I evolve and mature or chill out, I'm still unemployable.
Yep.
I'm enjoying my unemployment, although I do miss making money. So there's that. But we'll get into more of that later.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I think some of the things that are also unique about you, like you said, you're using your college degree, and you have your entire career. That's unusual. I share that as a business major coming out of Lewis and Clark and going into business. And of course, that was very broad based, very liberal arts. But hit on some frameworks and some high level elements. I also talk to us a little bit. it seems like there's a lot of key learnings that you could have taken away in those 10 years. Was that helpful when you started your own agency to have had that background of watching others do
Oh,
things right and terribly wrong?
absolutely. The challenge I have when I see young kids leaving college and going right into business for themselves, and I know two or three that we know, fellow agency owners that started their one or two that started their agencies in college. One of them's still in business. One of them's winding it down. The other already sold it. Of the three I know, but the challenge is a lack of context. So I have helped build a bunch of other agencies and a bunch of other very senior digital marketers over the years, having been a part of 10 agencies. So I was at 5 or 6 agencies before I started Anvil, and I learned what an agency is, what agency culture is like, what an effective agency person looks like, what the roles are. But most importantly, for my old boss, Ryan Wilson, who I hired me in 97 from the web development shop into a big PR firm here in Portland. He taught me how agencies work and the ratios you need to cover salaries and and have a what the target profitability is and all of these sort of things, so that when we parted ways after a year and 3 quarters together, and I started Anvil Media after that, I already knew how to run an agency, and he had given me enough leeway and enough guidance that it was a very unique, one of my few true mentors. I had basically two in my career, and the other was one of my bosses at my first PR agency, and ended up working with her for another 20 years as a consultant, on my team building and that sort of thing. She was invaluable, but really just two mentors. And if I could give part any advice is get as many mentors as you can with as many different perspectives, particularly that are different than you, because at the end of the day, it's I feel I was limited by only having two mentors because I jumped jobs too much, and then suddenly I'm an owner. It's hard to have mentors when you're an owner. People are like, I don't think you're going to listen to me, or you don't need me, or whatever the misguided thought is on that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I, on the other hand, started an agency right out of college. I had a partner that was 16 years my senior, but there was some mentoring there. But I think the biggest thing he gave me was the confidence to launch. But for many years, there was that oh my gosh, there's so much I don't know, and a lack of confidence to even reach out to guys like you and others in the agency world to be like, hey, let's enjoy some co-opetition instead of the competition and being adversarial. And I've certainly learned that lesson over time, but that's advice I suggest to others too, is, hey, figure some stuff out on someone else's dime, and then launch on your own with a lot more perspective. So yeah, that's helpful, validating.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, one of the things that I always appreciated and respected about you too was not only, well, let's start with thought leadership. I mean, it's one thing to promote thought leadership in your work to other leaders. It's another thing to live it and find that cadence and hustle as consistently as you do. Talk to us about your commitment to thought leadership, and let's talk about that
Yeah,
for a little bit.
yeah. So I guess it started. It helped that I had a maybe almost 2 years of tech PR as a background before I went into the internet, because most of the internet folks back in '96 were computer science nerds, whether they went to school for it or not. People that you translate to from my English to their Klingon, but in my world, it was I remember within 2 or 3 months of starting at the web development agency, which was called Vivo Media, which is informed the name of my agency, Anvil Media, later, coincidentally or not coincidentally, is that I was doing all this research to figure out my job as what is marketing on the internet, and all I knew, I had one tool, and that's PR. And so back then, there were very few publications online. There were not even ezine wasn't even a thing yet. And so there are very few channels to learn. And trying to learn marketing, there were no conferences, no books, no nothing. So I was constantly surfing the web, finding great information. And within a month or two, I went back to my boss and I said, "Hey, I'm getting all this great information. I think we should start like a weekly newsletter." And eventually I called it Anvil Media, thinking I would retire at Vivo Media, 2 or 3 jobs into my career. I was wrong every time, by the way. So what I did is I created a weekly newsletter, like, here's what's going on. And that we did web design, web hosting, which was a disaster, and then then I would talk about what I learned in marketing. And then I parlayed that in my next job as a monthly e-zine. So the thought leadership started with that easing. And 2 months later, I was not even 3 months into my job, 4 months tops. I was invited to go speak to a bunch of professors in Orlando, Florida, at this International Communication Professors Conference. So these were professors from around the world. So I flew there on a red eye. My creative director and I stayed up all night to create this really kick-ass presentation, which in the end wasn't. I don't even remember if it was any good. I just remember that we were both brain fried because we didn't have enough sleep, and it was not our best work. Literally, it was terrible. But I got up there mainly for him. He froze. He literally brain froze. He was half asleep and he couldn't think of what to say next. I got up there, did my little song and dance, and I realized I'm 2 years out of college, and 2 years ago I was sitting and listening to professors. Now I'm speaking to them, and they're sitting down, and I was like, "This is really cool." So that's what got. So I started the writing first with my e-zine, then I started the speaking part, and I already had been pitching the media for a couple of years. So those are the three legs of my thought leadership stool. Regardless of the content, is you got to write about it, you got to speak about it, and you got to pitch the media that you're an expert on, and each of those feeds the other. And that's what I've been doing for almost 30 years. And now that I'm on my own with a recently lifted non-compete, is I don't necessarily want to go back, and I'm not going to run my own agency again with actual employees. And I don't really want to work for somebody else and fix their problems. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's easier to fix other people's problems than your own. But I like that I choose my clients. I have a network of partners like Cascade, where my clients need something, or people in my network reach out and they say, "Do you know a good web development company that maybe does affordable e-commerce and has a scalable platform?" Yes, I know just the people. And that's an homage to you, in case you were wondering. And so bottom line is, I built my business, in particular Anvil, but at my previous agencies, when I was speaking and writing, I built our brand by being one of the first, one of the best, one of the biggest. But by 2013, after a little over 10 years of employees, Anvil was an also ran, and I blew it up and rebuilt it. That's perhaps a follow-on story. But I never stopped doing the thought leadership. It just got harder and harder as went from one competitor to 1,000 competitors in Portland, right? So thought leadership is how we've managed to stay ahead at every place I've been. And I still to this day speak 25 to 30 times a year, and I write, roughly 30 articles a year. So that's what keeps me in front of people. It's my marketing engine, and I've been evangelizing. I'm glad you asked, because I've been speaking and writing about the concept of thought leadership for one main reason for the Cascade Web Dev audience, is that it's brilliant SEO. Right, because AI, in the post-AI world, I just generated an article for my pdxMindShare blog post about exit interviews as part of my new passion, which is employee engagement and retention. But when things go wrong or things go right and they leave, you got to have an exit interview process. So I wrote, using a custom GPT prompt, I wrote an article that is undetectably, it's generated by AI, but not detected. It says it's a human article. Versus one I wrote yesterday for my MindShare blog about a similar topic, that was one of the same engine caught 100% of it as AI generated. So my point is, and I'm generating not to make myself famous, but to help educate people on employer engagement, because I'm going around the country and speaking about it, and I just need more materials. Like, people ask, what's a stay interview? What's an exit interview? Well, check out our blog. There's your answer. This is all you need to get started. So there's a lot to unpack in that, but that's my long answer.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. How much time do you spend each day with the thought leadership efforts?
Great question. I would say I'm probably thinking about, or writing probably on average once a week, but it may bleed into every 2 weeks. So a couple articles a month. That can go to 3 or 4 if I include my pdxMindShare backfill blog posts that are AI generated, that are supporting my main content around employee engagement. I am pitching the media probably 1 to 5 times a week, probably closer to 1 or 2. And I used to rely heavily on Help a Reporter Out, HARO for short, now owned by Cision. And I saw the return rate go from a 20% success rate of all my pitches down to about a 2% success rate. I've tapped others like Featured, Source Bottle, and Inside are alternatives, and I've found greater success, slightly higher conversion rates because they're lesser used, lesser abused. But the bigger thing is, having been in digital for so long, I still occasionally get people reaching out to me for a source. For the first 10 years of my career, the local news stations and magazines would reach out to me about a question about the internet. Because of my PR training, they knew I'd give a decent soundbite or a decent interview.
Yeah.
My face is ideally designed for radio, but every once in a while they'd put me on the air.
That's fantastic. Good to know, because that's something I'm getting strong encouragement from Simon to do some more of that and know that it would be beneficial, but also trying to get a handle on what level of commitment that makes. And obviously you've optimized it at this stage of your life, but good to know. Hey, you mentioned about speaking to professors early in your career, and then you found yourself in a bit of a professor position. Talk to us about the teaching you did with PSU and what that's looked like for you.
Yeah. So I back in '97, before I was or '96, before I was recruited to another agency called KVO, I saw one of their head of digital. And they called Interactive back then. So they're building websites starting in '93, '94. So KVO was early into web dev. I saw this guy, David Smith, present, and I thought he was a brilliant presenter. And he and I talked, and that led to them, the head of the largest PR group. I got on his radar, and he ended up recruiting me. But David would regularly have me speak at his classes, his web development classes at PSU. And that turned into, hey, would you teach a class? The first class I taught back in '99 or '98 was an internet marketing research class I made up from scratch, like it didn't exist. And I was using different tools, these bookmark tools that are long gone, to sort and collate. And then I took them through different ways to benchmark, basically doing what I was doing for a living to get paid to do. I taught my students to do that. And my win on that one of my first students, she took what she learned in my class. Actually, by this time, it was my digital marketing, search engine marketing class, which I taught for like 16 years as part of continuing ed. She took I think she spent $350 on my class, and she charged a client $1,200 to do the work that she learned within a week of finishing the class. That was
Wow.
a huge win for me, just like justifying, like, this is good stuff. People find value. And she was a quick learner, super smart. Client loved it. So I only know this because we grabbed coffee after. She's like, I got to tell you this story. I was like, that's fantastic. So I taught different classes, business, e-marketing, where I touch on email marketing, other things, and I felt like I was out of touch. So I just laser focused on search, which is what I do. I'd have guest speakers. It's like 16 hours of content around digital marketing. I did it because I love to teach. I love, clearly, as you said up front, I love to talk. I love to share my knowledge. But then I found, in our world of digital, there are computer web development classes. People can learn the different tools and languages. But, what's the degree in that? You're either a designer or a developer that knows code. There's not, maybe you can get a project management certification. But in my world of pure like search marketing, there was no real degree. Even today, they're sparse. Or as I've spoken at some of these at U of O and Oregon State, they take one assignment in a class, and that's their digital marketing, right? They might have a class if they're lucky, but I found that I got great talent. Excuse me.
Bless you.
As I've proven, I'm allergic to great talent, but I was able to find some good talent through that, but that wasn't the objective, but it was a benefit. And a couple of clients maybe, but I really enjoyed it. And I still am a volunteer instructor for SCORE. I teach a 2-hour social media workshop. And I had on Tuesday, this last Tuesday, I had 70 attendees to my free 2-hour workshop. And then inevitably I'm like, hey, I'll give you a free audit if, we didn't get time. And I have like 8 meetings booked, and then I can turn those into leads for my network, basically.
Wow. Yeah, that seems brilliant. Not only to bestow that wisdom on the next generation and help them be more effective, but to crank out job ready, young professionals with this emerging skill set. That seems like a win-win all the way around. Well, wonderful. Well, hey, And I think you've also demonstrated, EO, the interest in peer mentorship. I know you've been a part of that for quite a long time. But maybe just for a minute or so, talk to us about pdxMindShare, because I've really been impressed seeing you kind of build that community
Yeah.
and the support of that over the years.
Yeah, so pdxMindShare, I started back in '99. Almost everything I did in my career, I started in late '99, between late '99 and late 2000. So pdxMindShare started as a think tank of internet marketing folks that might include you, although I didn't know you back then, where we'd grab bourbon and talk about the future of the internet because it was before the crash. People were too busy, so we had two meetings, and then it went on hiatus for almost a year, and then everybody needed a job. So like, when's Mindshare happening next? So I restarted it, had a couple meetings, and then again, people got jobs again. So then I restarted a third time in December of '01 after realizing that, it's not just a guy's bourbon and cigar thing. There are some really brilliant women out there and other people that need to know each other. So I introduced some people, invited 20, 12 showed up, and they're like, this was great. When's the next one? That's when I started doing monthly events, up until just physical networking, up until Trader Vic's burned in, I think, 2016, when we had workshops and a little bit of networking as it evolved. Then I was burned out with the physical networking events, went purely online. So we have over 12,000 members in our LinkedIn group. We have maybe 100 in our Facebook group. I had done a lot of webinars, but now it's mainly just curating the blog around careers and employee engagement, my new passion. After being an employee for a couple months, I was like, there are some issues that need fixing. So that's where that pivot came from. We have a monthly newsletter, but the main thing is the LinkedIn group. And then you can post jobs and events for free, and there's some premium options there. But that has been the glue. I just had a guy call me this morning out of the blue saying, I think I met you 10 years ago at Mindshare, and I'm looking for my next gig, and I just want to pick your brain. I talked to him for 15 minutes, gave him some ideas. Do you know Alignable? He's like, no, what's that? I said, it's like a hyper local LinkedIn. I think it's a good fit for his background and where he's trying to go versus, somebody like you, Ben. I think it's of limited value. But I said, go to LinkedIn, go to the Mindshare blog and read about Alignable and go check it out. So I'm using the blogs. The blog is go read about it, then go do it, and then come back to me with questions.
That's really cool. Yeah, like I said, the community building aspect to that, and bringing folks together and giving them opportunities to speak and support and engage, it all seems really, really positive. Well, it's come up a couple times, but employee engagement. Obviously, yes, you started off, chasing business and being the guy and doing the stuff, and now we're seeing you kind of shift to a couple things. One, this fractional CMO aspect, this kind of consultancy that probably helps keep the lights on and keeps you sharp. And then this thought leadership and speaking around employee engagement. So love to have you share that journey with our audience here.
Yeah. So basically, I've had the CMO title, Chief Marketing Officer, twice. I would say now that I'm part of this group called CMO Coffee Talk, where I see real, MBA educated, Fortune 1000 B2B marketers. These people are, they're touching revenue. They're touching all the MarTech stack. These people are smart. So like, I'm at a different level. My happy place when it comes to what we'll call the fractional CMO, or frankly, just digital marketing consulting, is small business. I truly love working with small business, not just because they make me look smart, because they have no experience or perspective in digital like I've been living, the last almost 30 years. They appreciate, they pay, they're everything that my larger clients at Anvil were not. And I find what I enjoy most is moving large needles for small business versus infinitesimally small needles for large corporations, with a few exceptions, of course.
Yeah.
So I would say like a quarter of my time is consulting with a handful of clients. So that's block one. And then other than my speaking and writing as a thought leader, which is probably 80% focused on digital marketing, 20% focused on employee experience, that's going to switch over the next 3 to 5 years. I'm focusing more and more on this employee engagement. Why? Because back in 2000, I read a book by Les Schwab, the tire company that everybody on the West Coast knows. People on the East Coast or Midwest do not know Les Schwab. But basically, he had his book, as I read it back 20 something years ago, was about customer experience because he trained his employees to run up to the car to greet people when they're coming in to literally change their tires. Something that was, he basically reinvented an industry that was low service, high sketch. And he built a multi-billion-dollar business out of that. So I was inspired by his book, as weirdly authored, as titled as it is. It's out of print. It's super cheesy, spirit in action sort of stuff. The title's not great. The story is amazing. He's generated every store manager that is there for Everybody Never Leaves Les Schwab. They all retire millionaires because of their employee equity program, their stock plan. And that's unheard of outside of the tech space. So he's very, very generous. And I loved his perspective. But it took me 20 something years until I was literally fired to realize that I had slightly overvalued the customer or client experience in the agency world over the employee experience. And then I read amazing work by a woman named Tiffany Bova, BOVA, and she presented to the CMO Coffee Talk, these CMOs, about how there is not a direct correlation between investing in customer experience and profitability versus investing in the employee experience and profitability. There's a direct correlation. Every dollar you put into employee experience returns 80%. And this is based on massive research studies and multiple studies, versus every dollar you put into customer experience may not return anything. And then I realized connected the dots myself is based on my experience having hundreds of employees, but being a relatively small agency, never really over 16 employees, is that you can imagine an amazing, I've written about this, the first class mindset, creating a compelling Ritz-Carlton-like experience, no matter what price point you're at, no matter what industry you're in. But it's not sustainable if your employees are not able to carry that torch, right? If they're unhappy, it's not going to work. So if there is a McDonald's store manager, or better yet, an owner that cares more about his employees than anybody else, it doesn't mean he pays them more, although that's implied perhaps. It's that he takes care of them. And then when you go into that McDonald's expecting this and getting this, just incrementally more, you'll never forget that McDonald's experience. I'll give you an example. Why is it that everybody complains about young employees are largely worthless because of this millennial mindset and everything else? They're entitled snowflakes, yada, yada. Yet, when you go to a Dutch Brothers, these kids cannot wait to make you a $6 cup of Joe, right? They are ecstatic. How do they do that? Because Dutch Brothers has secret sauce. And ironically, as much as I politically disagree with Chick-fil-A, they have a similar culture with their young employees. People love working there. So why is it that you and I over the years have, I'll just speak for myself, struggled to attract and retain great employees? It's because they didn't feel like that they were my priority. They were way up there, and I took great care of my team in retrospect, but my execution wasn't flawless. So once I saw the research, then I went to this, you mentioned EO, Entrepreneur Organization. They have an event called Global Speakers Academy. So I went to Panama, where it happened to be hosted. And for a week, I built a single deck around employee experience. And basically the title is like, EX is greater than CX. Employee experience is greater than customer experience. And because everybody in our world of digital marketing and in design, it's the user experience. It's all about the experience, right? The customer journey. And what I realize is nobody benchmarks the employee journey. Have you benchmarked that at Cascade? Like from the first time they hear about you till the exit interview at every touch point, and where the gaps are? Nobody has. Right. So I'm not singling you out. So that's what I'm encouraging companies to do. So I'm working on building speaking workshops for EO, and I'm doing one next week, a 3-hour workshop for Vistage, one of the local Vistage chapters. And so I'm really, truly passionate about this. And I will just say one little tangential thing before you ask this question. I want to answer it. Is I sold my agency. It financially, it's okay. In fact, we won't go into details. It's gotten worse. So emotionally, not great. Financially, not great. So I'm not going to BS that and silver coat it. But let's say it went perfect and I got paid up front, which I didn't. It's too much on the back end. I still would be doing what I'm doing today. Why? Let's say I had enough money to retire and never work again, because I believe, and I'm in my early 50s, that I have the biggest network I've ever had. I have the most knowledge and experience I've ever had. And I have I still have passion and I have these unique abilities, the fearlessness to speak to crowds for whatever length of time, the competence to write effortlessly that's of decent quality, good enough, comfort working with the media. So my thought leadership isn't work to me. It's just fun. It
Yeah,
energizes me.
that's
And
great.
then working with entrepreneurs when I consult with them, I just met with CASA, court appointed special advocate. I gave them what I call a $1,500 audit. A small fraction of what I gave you, or will give you a small fraction of what I gave them, just as a pro bono, right? And they were grateful to say you gave us direction and prioritization of our digital marketing plans, right? We didn't have that. And so that's what I love doing is giving these entrepreneurs, small businesses. I'm used to working with much bigger companies, like the guidance and direction they need, and then they can decide: do they want to do it in house? Can I recommend? Oh, you need Cascade to build this, or whatever the case. So my point is, I'm not slowing down. Even when I move to Bend in a couple of years, I'm just going to keep doing this because it's not work to me. And based on my exit, still got to work anyway. But it's not work anymore. It's fun, and I'm grateful to have had my journey. But I'm not giving up. I'm doubling down. I think it's a foolish when people cash out and check out. I think it's straight up. I will say that to no matter how many billions or tens of millions people have in the bank, that they should be making an impact on society, make the place better than you found it. And if you're jerking in the bathroom, you're not taking care of business by employing your knowledge and your resources and your money to go make better. Just look at Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Zuckerberg doing nothing good for this planet with all the money they have. That's the end of my political rant. They could be ending homelessness, ending, starvation around the world. Instead, they're launching giant penises into the sky. So be that as it may, that's why I encourage everybody that's exited or thinks they have enough and want to check out, travel more, have experiences, but please give back, right? You have the resources and time. Please do that, because that's what I'm doing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've seen no shortage of people that have found success relatively early in life, and all of the effort, all of the passion, all of the commitment to the cause. When that dries up, their purpose and their happiness, their joy starts to dry up, and it's very, very consistent. And I'm with you. The traditional notion of retirement, where you check out and you hop on the front porch in a rocking chair and hold your wife's hand, for 20 years, and in most cases expire much sooner than that, doesn't appeal. I'm not sure I'll have as much energy to push, web development and design initiatives post retirement, or I should say post professional life, but certainly the appetite to really make positive change in other areas. I think that's a really important message. And going back to what you talked about in terms of charting that employee experience at Cascade, while we have been incredibly fortunate with the dedication of our development team, and increasingly now with Simon going on 4 years in a creative director capacity, there are a lot of folks in that client services role, project management strategist, account manager over the years, where I didn't prioritize them. And I did, put a lot of energy into it, but it was sort of hey, maybe the client is a little bit more important than you in this case, and maybe we should just take it. And then more importantly, I would hire junior folks to be the go-between between the actual knowledge holders and the doers, the developers, and the client. And that was frustrating for the client because they weren't dealing with the brain trust. And it was really frustrating for our developers because they would be handed some initiative, some strategic guidelines, and saying, well, why are we doing it this way? Why wasn't I brought in sooner? And that, that's on me. I wasn't setting the team up for success. So I agree with you 100% that employee experience component is so critical to long-term customer happiness. And it's really cool to see that work. I'm excited to continue to consume that content.
It's awesome.
Wonderful. Well, is there anything else you want to share, or thoughts on the employee experience, or do we want to maybe move in and talk a little bit more about your digital consulting services?
I just want to leave one, my greatest lesson of all my, we'll leave in the show notes. I've sent you guys my Write That Book summary of 28 years of entrepreneurship and successes and mostly failures. But there's the E-myth, right? The entrepreneur myth is you work on the business, not in the business, right? So a talented developer, a brilliant graphic designer, a copywriter. Somehow they end up running a business and they have employees, and that wasn't their intent. It's not their background. They have an English major, not a business major. I fortunately have a business major, but and I worked with and saw how agencies operated, but most people don't get that coverage before they launch into or stumble or fall backwards into a business. And I just want to like to go against the grain a little bit. So the E-Myth is spot on. You can't grow your business when you're working in the business. If you're answering phone calls and taking client calls and dealing with customer issues, or frankly, just a lot of employee issues, if you have enough employees, you're not growing the business. So when I joined EO, I instantly was like, I got the mantra, work on the business, not in the business. Unfortunately, in our industry, mine in particular, digital marketing moves really fast. And so within less than a year of focusing solely on the back end of the business and infrastructure and engineering culture and all these things, I quickly lost touch with the business. And that's a problem when you're the lead sales guy, especially when you're supposed to be representing the latest and greatest. And my team was at one point told me when I was working with Real Networks out of Seattle, they're like, half of what you just said is wrong. And, it took me aside and like, you need to shut up and step back. And I was so mad. And then I slept on, I was upset with myself. So what I would say is, Lee Iacocca said, hire great people and get out of the way. That's true if you're running a manufacturing business where you take this widget and you do that and you do this and you're done and just do that as best you can. You can kind of get out of their way. Or an experienced manager with a defined set of teams and responsibilities. My experience was I hired really smart people and I put them in these positions and it was like, you let me know when you have a problem. I assume you got it otherwise. And they failed miserably because we didn't have enough definition. We didn't have, training. We didn't have everything you would need to be successful. But really what we lacked was them trusting me that it was okay to come to me and say, I'm failing. I am still to this day furious and disappointed in them, but that's on me because I didn't create that transparency and that trust that they could come and say, I'm failing. They literally quit instead of fixing it or even coming to me and telling me it's broken. Yeah. So I was working on the business. I lost touch with the business. I lost touch with the team, with my clients and what it meant to do the work. And once I revisited that in 2013 and re-engaged, meanwhile, keep in mind, we were at our record revenue and strong profits when I blew the company up because I knew we were on the downslide and I was miserable. So once I rebuilt, I had a plan. I started to rebuild. I was fine. I was like, I need to stay up on this stuff. I need to have real conversations with my team members. I need to, and things got better and better and better. So I didn't sell low because I wanted to get it. I sold high because I had more altruistic goals of becoming a full-time thought leader, of course, getting my wife out of the operational role, but giving my team a bigger path in a larger company, giving my clients more services. It was fairly altruistic. It hasn't totally played out that way. I'd say, let's say 1 out of 4 has worked out well. The agency has taken good care of my clients. Not everything else has worked out great, but the intention was there. So that would be my one tip before we go into the services.
Really solid. Well, something kind of different than our normal flow here on the podcast is I thought it might be fun for Kent to demonstrate some of the consulting services he does by doing a bit of a scrub down of Cascade Web Dev and what he can glean from our website and any digital marketing efforts that he can identify out there, just as we here at Cascade are going through a rebrand effort led by Simon, and the rest of us are trying to do everything we can to genuinely support that effort. So yeah, looking forward to your observations, Ken, and the learnings that we can carry forward.
Yeah, sure. So I usually like to start at the beginning where I look at a website and I'm looking at, does it have the fundamentals? Keep in mind, my background for most of my career has been search engine optimization, SEO. So I look at, say, the Cascade Web Dev website, and it does have the foundational elements that I would say 90+% of websites have, but when they don't, it can be deadly. So, your website should have your domain.com/sitemap.xml. And Cascade has a thorough XML sitemap, and that's fantastic. What that does is tell Google what pages, when you index my site, what pages should they focus on and for how long and with what emphasis. So it's a roadmap on focusing that limited amount of Google juice or equity you have with that limited time they hit your site. The robot text file, of which you have one that's wide open right now, minus protecting your admin, which is great, is telling Google specifically or other engines not to visit certain pages that are secure, the back end of the shopping cart, other secure folders. And then, by the way, the XML sitemap is here if it's anywhere other than what I just said. So that's good. And then the third element you have that is important is that custom 404 error. So when I type in cascadewebdev.com/XYZ, and you can do this for your website, just /XYZ after your domain, does it come up with a branded template? Or is it a white error page of death with a little funny icon from your ISP, your website host? Because what that does is it tells Google and the visitor you're out of business because the page they bookmarked or somehow found in search that's old is not visible. So when I do that with Cascade, I get your navigation, I get your brand, problem solved. So these are things that you're doing that everybody should be doing. And I'll give you an example. I did this audit. I do this usually when I had a team. I would do this kind of audit as part of my new business. Now I charge clients for it because I'm not pitching a bigger engagement. I'm pitching an affordable initial consultation. I was pitching Semantic, the big software company with global concerns and tens of thousands of employees. And I told the CMO at this event I paid to go pitch them at called Richmond Events, I said, your site is unindexable right now. For some reason, your robot text has disabled your entire domain. And I said, that's basically corporate suicide. And if you talk to your web team, you're going to see your traffic's down 80% or more. And she stopped. Can you hold on 1 second? She got on the phone. She said, what the effing whatever, fix this right now. It turns out the dev team had been making patches to the site and forgot to re-enable the robot text to what it was. They didn't revert it back. So they lost 90% of their traffic for a couple of weeks and had to rebuild it back. So that's how important this is. So even the big guys can get stuck with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, we had that experience once with a client where something similar happened, and a couple months later, everyone's kind of doing this, and ultimately, it's right here. That's where you get to choke. But those are some things from a policy perspective, and checks and balances that the team must run. It's one of those critical filters.
Right.
But what a compelling story.
Yeah, and I'll give you one or two other nuggets here, and we can go offline later. And I got like 25 other suggestions here. But one of them is with a PR background. When people always say, oh, can you look at my site? The first thing I ask is not what your domain is. I say, what's your company name? And they'll give me like Cascade Web Dev. So what's the first thing I do? Think of the cocktail introduction. And, oh, yeah, I met that guy, Ben, from Cascade Web something, Cascade Web. So you type in, and what you want to see is your website number one and your social profiles and favorable reviews from, in your case, not so much Yelp, but maybe G2 or Capterra, places that review service companies like yours or Anvil formerly. And then your local listing, Google My Business. You want that all to be curated. You want at least a dozen reviews and as high as 5-star average, as close to 5 as you can get. My experience with recruiting, so reviews on Indeed and Glassdoor that are under a 4 are actually preventing you from getting certain people to apply. And I had, back in 2013 when I blew the company up, for 2 years, I had people post nonsensical reviews and 1 stars, and it crushed our star average. And people would agree to a review, an interview, and then cancel when they would just, it isn't, if they read the reviews, if they were smart, they would say, I have questions on, does the CEO really carry a skateboard from the trunk of his car to the office every day? I would say no, not even once. And I'm glad you asked, because it's irrelevant to the employee experience here. That's just somebody taking pot shots, and not even good pot shots at that. But people would just bail, right? So you have to really curate when it comes to recruiting your Glassdoor and your Indeed reviews. And that's painful. If you're a consumer-facing business, Yelp has a similar blackmail style where they with the filters, lower your average to get you to do advertising, and then magically your star average goes up. So managing that's important. What are ways to do that? Having a whole employee review program or a customer review program to curate your online reviews. I have articles about that on the Anvil site. That's still live at anvilmediainc.com. And then you also can do that same thing with your employees. And then you can also buy your brand. So buying your own brand name, I have an article on 5 reasons you should buy your own brand on Google, whereas eBay fervently disagreed. It cost them millions of dollars to buy their brand. Well, eBay is eBay, right? But when it comes to your brand, the lowest cost you'll ever spend is buying your brand. It's goodwill, you're defending it, etc. There's a bunch of reasons to do it. The other is claim all the big 8 social profiles, all the big social media platforms. You claim a profile, a business profile on each of those big 8, 9 if you include Alignable, and curate the content on there. So when I do a search for Cascade Web Dev, I see your website, I see your ad above it. So now you've got most of the fold, and then below that is your social profiles and positive reviews. And then if you take the PR side of things, which I highly recommend, is pitch yourself as an expert, get those media mentions, then that rounds out your top 10. And then it's hard for an angry ex-employee, angry ex-client, or just some douche, typing to ruin you with a blog post or a bad review because you have a high number of reviews with a high star average. So curating your presence online is really important. And that's something that very few brands spend a good amount of time doing.
It's fantastic information for us as we're going down this path. And I think I'll be curious to see where we are on that journey. But completely understand what you're recommending. In fact, we did a pretty significant reviews push with our existing client base within the last year, because back in 2020, while we were relocating from our office in the rail cars across the street from OMSI with a dedicated sort of company line to full distributed workforce working out of home offices, someone tried to call that office line and it didn't work, and they gave us a 1-star review. Someone from a little mom and pop weed shop here in Portland. Like, were they a prospect? Did they really want a website? No, but they were having a bad day, and bless you, they were not probably consuming enough of their own products to realize that was pretty unnecessary. And I've even called them like, hey, maybe consider taking that down, and no action there. So interesting how you have to try and claw your way back from some dissidents, and it's always, you can't control where they come from. So interesting.
Yeah. And I will say this, 2 other quick thoughts, and we'll see how we're doing on time. But so you're doing something really bold on your homepage with leave us a Google review, and then you link to your Google My Business listing. That's pretty ballsy. I've never recommended that before because of what just happened to you. Is one, people they use it when they're in a bad mood, right? Mm-hmm. I recommend, but what this tells me is you guys are so good. And also, if you double check your reviews, they're phenomenal, is that you're so cocky, you're saying, I'm not worried, bring it. And almost nobody else does that. So you can actually use that as a part of your sales pitches. We're so good, we put the Google review link so any hater could use it, and we're not even afraid, right? Bring it. So that's ballsy. For everybody else doesn't have the cojones, send that through an email every time. That moment when your client has maximum delight, send that suggestion to them. Train your team to do that, right? The last bonus point I'll give you, or kudos, is your email sign up in the footer of your website is really important. And so, saying what it is, sign up for our newsletter. It's not just a scheduled newsletter, it's a valuable resource. I will tell you from my experience, the Anvil newsletter over 22 years was my single best lead nurturing, lead generation tool. And secondarily, when other brands are all about getting more followers and engagement on social, the problem with that is, let's say you have 10,000 or even 1,000 followers on any given platform, Facebook, Instagram, doesn't matter. You have to keep buying those same people over and over because only 5% or less are seeing your posts. But your newsletter is getting 100% visibility. It just depends if they open it and click through. That's up to utilizing tools and best practices that's an email marketing question at that point. But you don't have to keep buying them other than fractions of pennies every time you send them a note. So the job that I tell my clients as a marketer is get people to your newsletter, get them to complete a form so you can build a dialogue with them. Social are ATMs to your main branch, right? They make convenient for people, but they don't transact. You're not going to grow a client off an ATM. You're going to grow them face-to-face in the branch. And you can have a really good ATM, and it's like, I'm not going to do a home loan through my ATM while I'm getting $40 for scratch it. So the idea is like build that following through your newsletter. And so many clients don't have the sign up in the footer like you do. So many companies, I should say. All my clients do. I demand it. But I think that's another heads up of something you're doing really well, and that others should take note of.
Wonderful. Well, that's good news. And I've gotten a couple a couple points of validation recently that email is far from dead, and that that is still a really functional tool to stay in front of your clients. And then layering on top of it, obviously, once you have that list, it's a matter of strategically communicating with that audience. And as part of that, how do you feel about drip campaigns and automated marketing tools like HubSpot and others?
I've used, I'll try and answer the question. So I've used maybe 10 platforms over the years to build and nurture contacts and mainly just send the email. And I would say that I just had to have a call with another, one of the other EO agency owners. I reached out and said, I need somebody to help me understand what's going on with this HubSpot list. I'm trying to merge the lists and it's really easy. And what I used to use, Cooler Email, or more recently, MailChimp, is like how to merge and dedupe lists, and HubSpot does it differently with their active lists. So I have a workaround, but my point is, I just like that HubSpot, because my database is under 2,000, I'm only sending monthly emails. It's free. That's the right price for me. And it does way more than I ever need it to do. And if I want to pay another $20 a month, I can have it do exponentially more.
Yep.
But my whole point is, you can start with the free, most basic email platform just to get a subscription form on your site and just commit to putting an email newsletter together. And of course, I've written a 3-part series on how to build an effective email newsletter strategy, because I built a plan for a client and realized this is too valuable information to keep. So I built it into a 3-part article series for Smart Brief.
Nice. Good information. Good information. Awesome. Well, man, I appreciate all that information and look forward to the 25 other ideas you have that we can look to implement and just get better at that craft, because I think there's a lot of blind spots, no doubt about it. And I think it'll be real helpful as we're trying to just get a little bit better every day.
Yeah, you bet.
Excellent. Well, let's see. I don't know, any other, you gave us some great nuggets there in terms of some valuable lessons and recommendations. Anything else you want to share with our audience before we wrap things up?
No, I just say that I've written and spoken extensively. So I would go to pdxMindShare.com, check out the blog and the archive webinars for more insights into how to build your career and how to build your business. And then how to improve the employee experience. The last couple months of blog posts have been around improving employee experience. I'm going to be posting an article on how to craft an effective exit interview. I'm working on that today, as a matter of fact. So there's a lot of that. And so that's at pdxMindShare.com. Plus you can join the LinkedIn group from there. And then if you want to learn more about sort of my speaking and what I do for a living, you can go to kentjlewis.com, just because that's my name. And you can see some of my archived presentations. It's a little bit more about me. And then last but not least, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm the most important Kent Lewis in Portland. And I think I'm just like linkedin.com/in/Kent Lewis, because I'm one of the early adopters. So I have a pretty sweet URL for that. So hope to stay in touch.
Wonderful. Well, Kent, always enjoyable, always entertaining, always informative. Thank you for taking some time with us here on the WebWell Podcast, and look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you, gentlemen, for having me.